Yes, it's exciting that she still had a bed. Throw everything away and become free. Minimalism as a gateway to self-knowledge. Big topic, short time, so I have to be a bit minimalistic. So today I'm just using the example of owning things and throwing them away. I could do the same with food or life with or without shoes. There are still a number of areas. I divide the lecture into 3 parts. Firstly, farewell to maximalism, my minimalist manifesto, so to speak. Secondly, throwing things away as a gateway to internal revolution. And thirdly, just a very meaningful outlook on the big topic, general minimalist lifestyle. Practical theology is not always practical, we like to emphasize that. I'm a bit of an exception. My focus has increasingly become meditation research, and because you start to try out a lot of them, at some point I also experimented with food, or with schools or home furnishings, and surprisingly I ended up with a current fashion trend. That surprised me myself. So I could just as easily approach the whole thing from a monastic perspective, and today I'm just doing it from a fashion trend perspective, and leave monasticism and meditation outside. Some people who already know me might be horrified. Today I'm really not going to say anything about meditation. First, farewell to maximalism, the Minimalist Manifesto. Tonight I'm talking about progress through an alternative culture and not through the mainstream. I'm talking, as is typical for some people, about a culture of concentration. This is the opposite of distraction and multitasking. I'm talking about a culture of minimalism because this downsizing makes us pretty big, and not always just expansion. So I say goodbye to the opposite, the culture of distraction, of multitasking. I speak from experience and from many examples of the downfall of the self-destruction of a culture that maximizes faster, higher, further, ever more insatiable, having more and helping more. I'll quote because the Pope might not be so cool everywhere, but rather the Dalai Lama. He's always friendly. He says that material progress alone does not create an ideal society. Even in countries and societies where impressive external prosperity has been achieved, mental health problems have increased, he says. No legislation, no external pressure can bring about or even determine the well-being of a society, because this well-being depends on the inner attitude and attitude of the people who make up this society. So, in short, external growth does not guarantee inner happiness at all, and inner happiness cannot be forced either. But society is built up from these people. The Dalai Lama goes on to say that spiritual development in harmony with material progress is of the utmost importance. Companies are now also realizing that loans and know-how are available to everyone after a year of a certain amount, and that the greatest growth potential is employee development, employee support, and so on. Well, now the word meditation. And in this respect, for example, large companies like Siemens now voluntarily pay for meditation times for their employees and send managers to monasteries and say, "We'll pay you for it." So even in business, this has long since arrived. The internal development of employees is central to growth. The same, of course, also applies to society as a whole. I quote the Dalai Lama again. He says that general human mental emotional development is not yet complete. There is still a lot to discover and recognize within ourselves. This has nothing to do with religious principles. It's about the mental attitude. Some parts or abilities of the brain may only be fully utilized to their full capacity through deep meditation. But even if we don't practice it, we should continue to explore things. Humans are not yet fully developed beings, so again the topic of inner development. In my opinion, that is the most urgent thing we need in this society. And he says that in every person there is something like something that has not yet been born, something that has not yet become. Without this, we would not exist. And he thinks that our conventional way of existing is very much determined by external factors, and doesn't say much about our ultimate truth. So much for the Dalai Lama. So, today, I'm starting right at the heart of consumer society with my Minimalist Manifesto, and I take as an exemplary approach dealing with what we have bought, what has accumulated in apartments, in wardrobes, in basements, and who knows where, on bookshelves, in file cabinets. My thesis is that throwing things away leads from the buying frenzy and possibly also from the collecting mania into the frenzy of life and self-knowledge. Maybe you notice, and you also notice this with some people, that those who have bought and accumulated a lot of things end up being a bit disoriented. Or was he or she already there in the beginning when he or she bought it? On the other hand, Adi, because this person was perhaps so up-to-date or created such super complete collections, he was actually excellently conditioned by this society. She just dutifully bought and collected everything. But the more we follow this external orientation, buying makes you happy, accumulating makes you happy, accumulating makes you happy, the more we realize that we are somehow without control. We are simply focused on maximization. But what does the inner voice say? Does it still exist? We are always told that maximizing obviously makes you happy. More status, more knowledge, yes, cautious, but at least for the exam. Buy more, own more. That's wrong. Once you reach saturation, more doesn't help. But we have forgotten how to recognize signals of this saturation. Maybe there are still certain flavor enhancers through advertising and trends, just like with food in some tasteless dishes. Where is the saturation limit, really, and what happens next when we stop maximizing? That nothing, I say, happiness comes. Exactly the happiness that was actually promised by maximizing. This may all sound very far-fetched. Therefore, at least now, even if it is Night of the Profs, I owe proof, and I take a Harvard psychologist and the example of super luck, namely winning the lottery. So winning the lottery is something like the epitome of a moment of luck, plus the following guarantee of long-term happiness. Commonly, the Harvard psychologist Gilbert claims otherwise. He has generally examined lottery winners and found that the luck effect lasts an average of 3 months. Then it fizzled out. After that, maybe they're dealing with the fact that they've actually moved to a super island, and then maybe there are some nasty sandflies and sand fleas. They lost their known circle and things like that, so most of life is everyday life. 3 months after the big bank transfer, people were as happy as before or as unhappy as before. Unfortunately, it has been psychologically proven that the cultural conditioning of happiness based on material things is misleading. Therefore, please only expect a short-term happiness effect. After all, you can enjoy it from cars, houses, bruni, lottery winnings, and gold medals. Now let's take a closer look at how I do this automatically. Status. After all, I belong to a group there too. Psychologically, it has been proven that status makes men in particular happy. However, please make sure that you don't rise so high, for example as CEO, that from then on you only have to deal with CEOs. That makes you unhappy again. So once you reach super status, don't spend too much time and be equal there. Now part 2, throw it away as a gateway to the internal revolution. As an introduction to this new form of progress through minimalism, I now propose to you a seemingly very external path to the exploration of the interior. Maybe you'll notice if you don't just store things like that and buy additional storage options at IKEA, under bed drawers, wakes for compression measures, and the like. So if you really don't put things away, I mean really sort them out, throw them away, that requires clarity, concentration, and because you have to concentrate on so much else, these days it's rare that you get to do it. So a strong personality, not just pushing it off somewhere, and quite a lot of mental clarity. Monks also claim that the material and the spiritual are quite closely intertwined. And vice versa, when a lot of things have accumulated, it can lead to something like a mental blockage of things. That's what it feels like, a kind of ownership depression. They then feel old and stuck. Luckily, most of them are still young, have moved. New to the shared apartment is actually not that good yet. But the threat comes when they are 60 or 70 and have to clean out their parents' house. And maybe you have such a large wedding umbrella in your hands that you've never used and are wondering, what do I do with it now? Strong personality, great mental clarity. Maybe you'll just click on this lecture on YouTube and the further information. Minimalists claim that reducing is more important than reducing in order to live happily. And anyone who throws away a lot, i.e. dares this revolution in home furnishings, i.e. I have now thrown away the bed, also leads to a revolution in the head and heart, and throwing things away can be a very cost-effective replacement for lengthy psychotherapy. Why? Now we come to this connection between things and personality. Anyone who comes from meditation will notice that we actually charge everything with fantasies. So why do we pick up the stone from the beach or the mountain peak? Because we charge it with our memories and with a good feeling. Or why do we put gifts on postcards? Why do we stock up in large quantities? So the more uncertain we are, the larger the supplies have to be. So things have a lot to do with our feelings and fantasies. Anyone who comes from Tai Chi or Qigong and knows anything about energies knows that we load attention and forces into these things, and then we lack them ourselves. All the things that make up our possessions are never there by chance. They are an expression of what we want, what we fear, and ultimately what our deepest motives in life are at the moment. If I can throw away, says one of these big tidying minimalism experts, of course a Japanese woman, they have particularly little living space and very expensive. She says we don't know what we need now in the present. So the less we know what we need in the present to be happy, the more we either live in the past, so our home becomes private, to the private museum or to the family archive museum. The more we are afraid of the future, the greater the supplies need to be, in as many areas as possible. So this lack of clarity for the here and now leads to us accumulating tons of useless things, and on top of that, we are so buried that the lack of clarity increases. We are not getting any closer to our own aliveness, and so we end up in the maximizing depression in our own four walls. Then you can always feel it yourself and look around at friends. Really, a lot of possessions leads to a lot of happiness. Marie Kondo, this Japanese woman, then gives some very simple disposable advice. For her, it's not about IKEA boxes and new sorting shelves, but about actually throwing them away. Only keep the things that make you happy. How am I supposed to find out what really makes me happy? So there are thoughts in your head. Wow, if you have that, you should actually be happy. She makes it very easy. Body reflex. Body reflex. So all things should not be sorted by room, but by category. All clothes in one pile. Again, sweaters, pants, socks, and so on. And now let's start with the clothes. Spontaneously grab the absolute lucky piece. And then you notice that your personality straightens up. Your eyes light up, but something from the bottom. Maybe that's a hesitation, because some memory reminds you, yes, it's another discarded item from my sister, but she gave it to me so lovingly. So there are completely different things in the physical expression, so throw it away, not with your head, but with your heart. Per category, i.e. the 3 absolute favorite items that grab the cream cake even on the bookshelf, and then they have a perceived standard of happiness. And it's all the more exciting to point out the parts that are still lying around. It was expensive, it was a special offer, it was a loving gift, it is a valuable museum piece. I have it for status reasons. My wife is impressed by it when I wear it. However, this will most likely make it clear for many other areas of life as well as their motives for action. Being loving, acting out of status, helping out cheaply, even if I don't really like it. And that's where throwing things away as self-recognition begins. So nothing ended up with us by chance. And now the question is, everything is like a tenant who doesn't pay rent and a bit of a silent accusation. From the bookshelf, you really want to surround yourself with accusatory parts that always say, you actually wanted to read me. I am your Spanish course you wanted this year. If you want to get rid of bad feelings now, they are in things, and by disposing of things. They are increasingly coming into the here and now, i.e. out of this family museum or private museum attitude, and also out of this storage for a possibly extremely uncertain future. I come from a war generation family, and I can see the images I have in mind now, the gigantic museum supplies that this generation accumulated, and I just know that everything's being cleared out. So stock up on tea towels and bars of soap. Let's leave that alone. It's a shame about life because it just expresses this fear of the future. So now it's about, you notice it's not about this sentence, clean up. It's not about amazement. It's about self-knowledge. And that's why I'm taking exactly this route. This is something that leads to the lifestyle of minimalists. This is not just an external style to somehow impress people. Going barefoot to make an impression or having what others may perceive to be extreme dietary habits, but rather this courage to question social values. So maximizing really makes you happy. And Marie Kondo also says that what comes out of it, what the apartment looks like, can be very different. So if you realize you are a total green stuff minimalist, and that makes you happy, then I would rather throw out more and make room for plants. A bit of seagrass mattress or something. So really don't let cultural norms slow you down, but say, this is my passion and everything, plant-based makes me happy. Bastu, the most stubborn one. For Marie Kondo, it's not so much about the living space being largely free, but rather that it's like the second puberty again, only without pimples and braces and with more money. Create the freedom from conventions and use this disposing of wealth waste as self-knowledge. What is your standard of happiness? And that actually leads to discoveries in inconspicuous boxes from childhood, then things that were made from the youth room, but which no longer had room for training in the performance society. And suddenly they realize, wow, an old crab claw, a collection of shells, or something else, or collecting rocks, what is there that, whereas as a child they could only collect things, now it's about living. So that the collection was just a placeholder for a lifelong dream. By throwing things away, they are throwing a lot of worried or dusty feelings, but also a lot of illusions of ownership into the container. Marie Kondo says that anyone who has hoarded things recognizes, for example, an uncontrollable direction, but also through the hoarding of things, or at some point in my life, I have accumulated 12 bicycles. To illustrate this gear, which became clear to me, at some point it was about, what should I do with the driver collection? And it became clear to me that when you say goodbye to things, you should also be clear about why you kept them, that these bikes only started accumulating when I no longer had time for long bike rides. So I made that on an old carrot. And now buying was just a substitute for no longer living. By throwing things away, they gain more profile. Attachment to the past and uncertainty about the future are increasingly clarified. And that's exactly what makes you fit to be completely flexible in the moment, so that they realize that it's about life. The mass of things was actually just a preliminary stage, a substitute for the actual project, namely doing, living. People who have gone through this process of happiness norm decluttering say a feeling of clarity settles on my soul. I will never fall for special offers and buying sprees again. While cleaning up, I figured out what I really want to do, which is not own it so much. This brings us to part 3, general minimalist lifestyle. There is another minimalist for the home sector, and another Japanese, Fumio Sasaki. The book is called It Can Go Away, and on the cover There's a very ugly crocheted yellow seat cushion against a gray background. He lives in an even more extreme way, i.e., with almost nothing left in the apartment, but he also did it step by step. He works as an editor for a publishing house, so it's clear that he loves books, has hoarded a lot of books in his unfortunately somewhat cramped Japanese apartment, and says that the worst thing was that every time there was an earthquake, he was afraid that he would be killed by his own possessions. He no longer has the problem. And then he increasingly clarified what he really needed and threw more and more away. I now also have a little cereal bowl, a favorite plate, a favorite cup, and a favorite piece of cutlery left over. Otherwise, of course, the question is, if you live with someone, how you make it clear to them can trigger fears in others. Because with this topic there have to be 6 white wine glasses, 6 red wine glasses, the cognac snifter, the whiskey glasses, the liqueur glasses, everything in 6. What will happen to the, as I said, big heirloom, the wedding tableware that the in-laws never used because it was so good for it? And that is also misery. And that's a really great misery when you hold this giant tureen in your hands, the saucer, the sugar bowl, the cream jug, and say, I want to live a minimalist life now. So we're making a family museum, and that is this misery. After that, you no longer have parts where you say yourself, this is too good. So it's too bad that I use it, because then it's no longer worth new. And the top 3 is always imagination. Even Marie Kondo can do it through the outer packaging. So there are sometimes partners who insist that you also keep the outer packaging, because then you could sell it on eBay at an even higher price, with outer packaging and instructions for use. Clear statements don't tend to work, so get rid of the thing, and instructions for use can fortunately be found in abundance on the internet these days. So, when you get through these dramas, unlived lives, and postponed dreams, you end up with the fact that it's increasingly about what is being sold to you these days, events. So do it, experience it, be outside, and then the apartment plays a minor role. So Fumio Sasaki only owns very, very little, which is of course quite possible in the digital society. Many things can easily be saved in files. And he says, is he now a pest for the economy, so that it causes the gross national product to fall too much? He says no, because he continues to spend money, but not so much on things, but rather, for example, his self-confidence has increased, his clarity, for example, to take a climbing course. Did he never trust himself before? Or he is tearing up a lot now. He is maintaining his friendship network because he realizes that the most important thing in life is relationships, is maintaining friendships. He doesn't sit in the apartment as much anymore. Well, he doesn't have those sets of 6 glasses when friends come and say that they can do that in the restaurant too. So you can rent a lot instead of having to hoard everything yourself. And by sometimes getting tired of other people's things, you can even develop warm contacts. So essentially, life is about pursuing the project that is central to you. And before he was someone who didn't like cleaning because it took so long. The more you own, the longer it takes. Now there are now these vacuum cleaning electronic turtles, as some say. But they say again, just don't leave anything on the floor. Everything will be gone when they vacuum. So that's not the solution again. And he says he's never had more fun cleaning than now. He's done it in a flash. This thing, with the mountain of washing up, was also taken care of very quickly, and sentences like, get rid of the illusion that you can't part with your things, come from someone like that. However, he adds, you have to learn how to throw things away, and, above all, which I also found exciting, they explore why they can't part with things. That says things say so much about us, and by giving things an inner farewell, you actually clarify your past. It won't be put back in the box again. He says, minimalism is difficult, but not impossible. And he argues again and again that everything has to be managed, everything has to be ordered. So everyone, especially the bigger the possessions, the bigger the rat tail, the more immobile they feel, that you are more tied down. And he says their brain capacity, their energy, and their time are limited. So either they have a nice, tidy apartment, everything is tidy, but then they have little time to pursue their favorite passion. They throw away something commonplace that they only have to show off. A lot of things decided for me too. And this same argument also applies to rent. Our things are like roommates, except they don't pay rent. And then the great temptation. So it's really big when you finally have a really empty living room. This is free for everything. So for gymnastics exercises, a bit of partying, so a multifunctional room, leave unused space free, so especially from your partner. You will then get great suggestions about what you could put there now that you have disposed of it. Then the argument about the books. Forget the word at some point. Also as a tip, overall it really feels like rebirth. Say goodbye to your old self. So this energy that usually comes to you as an accusation or as a lousy old story, partly based on old things, is then gone. Then there's the money thing again. Forget the price. There are now videos on YouTube of me warning 15,000 euros with my minimalist lifestyle. Some people actually have the time to put it on eBay or sell it second-hand. Because the sentence, where there may still be tweets between generations, nobody needs supplies. In any case, these days it's no longer like it was right after the Second World War that some shops are open 24 hours a day, because maybe there's still a way to chill out with a partner. The argument is that you need 3 packs of toilet paper. Is one enough, or maybe 1 roll is enough? The tip is to separate yourself from anything that you cannot talk about with passion. Or the test question. Would you buy the item again if it were lost? The question of piety in throwing away memorabilia does not mean throwing away memory. Throw. So often it is actually the opposite. The thing moves from the outside in. Our home is not a museum, and then what is typical for minimalists, such bright visual things attract attention, and that is, again, the monastic thing. Something that takes my focus away from me, gives me energy. So there are people, even if they have dishwashing detergent, they first remove those bright advertising labels, or refill the things. So say goodbye to optical rioters, rent what I let rent, and don't take anything because it's cheap or given away. So you can also take a great photo of a gift. It's about the moment of giving. Once you get through it, that was just a gateway. What else could you expect from the large field of minimalist lifestyle? So I went from a minimalist diet to this minimalist home decor. With Sasaki it was the other way around. He came to the subject of food after he was more focused. From there you really start to wonder, does it have to be 3 times? What am I actually eating? So you have so much free brain capacity to now consciously ask yourself, like I felt about shoes, why do I actually wear shoes? Who invented shoes? Why does the paragraph have to be at the back? And just from the statics, these are such childish questions from the moment, because this compassionate nature of children. I don't like putting on my shoes. Then again about worried city dwellers who put boots on their dogs even in winter, and these poor desperate animals try to chew it off and now slip on the snow. On Wikipedia I was told there is different information in German and English. So the German Wikipedia says that when it comes to shoes, the nobility invented the heel for self-aggrandizement. Maybe make it a little bigger. But the price, and this is typical minimalist thinking, is no cultural habits to demonstrate themselves. They are unique and not designed to be easily standardized. And when you start to think overnight, I also heard this from physiotherapists. Imagine a high-rise building, 175 meters high, with a foundation built 1 meter crooked. Analogous to our body, what do you get out of it as a person? The body is intelligent, balances the lumbar spine, cervical spine, it's not so good. On top of that, the foot is usually permanently in a plaster cast. The fascia atrophy at some point, especially when they wear insoles. The business collapses a bit because they are the permanent customer for the whole thing. So I have all my foot damage as a typical compliant lady. Lumbar spine, cervical spine, splay arches. I thought when the diagnosis was made there might be an umbrella. But that was just what was on the list, and a typical jogger with a pronation support and everything was like that. Now I finally have healthy feet and have gotten rid of a lot of back problems and don't have to wear the insoles that were supposedly necessary for life. So, that's minimalism with this Schuldings, and I'm not doing it to punish myself. You can watch from then on. If there is too much split, it bothers me too much. Jogging rounds in the forest are often on gravel and lace-like stones, which I don't really like either. But there are barefoot shoes, or you can also do it cheaply with normal neoprene surfing shoes. They are also waterproof. So that's minimalist footwear. And when it comes to nutrition, where did I end up? With having an eating window. So others may know this as intermittent fasting. But fasting sounds so nasty. So I was never interested in fasting. That sounded too ascetic to me. But then I read about a doctor of nutritionist who had a world record in his weightlifting class, and he only consumed 1,200 calories in 2 hours a day. And is this kind of muscle-less, amen raw. And then he also uses specialist texts and animal experiments to prove that we are large mammals and that we are actually constantly over-fertilizing our bodies. And if we ate less, again minimalistic, then we would get a bomb immune system, become super strong, and also a much better feeling of happiness. I'm still in the process of testing it out. And that feels very, very difficult for me because this uncontrollable greed in areas of life or where you come up short as an ex-depressed person, that was bad. So to take this happiness away from you, we can eat away so many feelings. And at the beginning, it started again for me. Why am I eating now? Nervousness? Dissatisfaction? These motifs again. Sugary foods are also very bad for your hearing and your mood. And so I ended up with my now eating site window 3 hours a day. And I can't claim that I'm now completely emaciated or have lost strength. That was just very cautious because my hobby is sea kayaking on the East and North Seas. You are the only engine there, and I like to do that even in winter. So that's the spectrum where minimalism can lead. The basic question, however, despite all externalities, remains that they ask themselves in their own unique way, what are the lasting acids of being happy? Of course, apart from psychology, there is also this marshmallow test. And I have the impression that our culture trains us to do advertising in a rather stupid way. This is a marshmallow test that's pretty old. That you let children sit in front of a chocolate course and say, "Here you have one. I'm going out of the room. And if I come back after an hour and it's still standing, you'll get 2. And these people's careers or happiness in life depended not so much on their level of education later, but on how they passed this marshmallow test. So instant satisfaction, immediate happiness, short-term, or as they say in modern German these days, sustainable short-term renunciation, but then long-term happiness. And then again I bundle the whole thing into the long-term happiness pillars, which is what we actually always know. So it doesn't have that much. So just up to a setting limit, but that you take care of your health. Imagine having your dream house by the sea, waking up in the morning but only having back pain or a serious illness. So there is no point in owning this dream home. Health includes diet, exercise and sleep as the pillars that we really pay attention to what leads to longevity. The old minsters and military masters knew this, so this is also an area of research. Then relationship. Really having time for primary relationships and maintaining friendships. Imagine waking up in your dream house, perhaps by the sea or in the mountains, in perfect health, seeing great sunrises and sunsets, but alone. So it's not really fun. So we have health and relationships as long-term happiness values. And now let's add something else. You need a passion. They need something, perhaps as they sometimes did in their childhood, so that when the sun comes up in the morning, nothing can keep them in bed. They want to get out because something they enjoy is waiting for them, maybe playing outside with friends or annoying someone or whatever. Throwing things away can make it clear that they can find out for themselves what their passion is, for which they would like to live to be 100. And then it's not about reading books about it or listening to courses, but rather just doing it. I wish you good luck in life. Thank you for engaging with the topic, and I wish you a happy evening ahead. That was very interesting. I'll change the listener case now. Have fun with your planting.